While his glamorous mistress stood laughing beside him, billionaire CEO Arthur Vance pointed at his own wife in front of 500 wealthy guests and sneered, "This gold digger manipulated my dying father for money." The room erupted with whispers as cameras turned toward the humiliated young woman standing alone in a simple dress, fighting back tears. Moments later, Ethan proudly announced their divorce and ordered her to leave his life forever. But just as his mistress wrapped her arm around him in victory, the ballroom doors suddenly swung open and a dead billionaire's final message appeared on the giant screens. Within seconds, the mistress's smile vanished, the crowd gasped in horror, and Ethan realized he hadn't destroyed his wife that night, he had destroyed himself. What secret did the dying billionaire leave behind that turned the most powerful man in the room into the poorest? Hello, beautiful people, welcome back to Alcott Stories. I'm your storyteller, James, and today I bring you a powerful story of betrayal, heartbreak, greed, and a kindness that changed a billionaire's life forever. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Alcott Stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another emotional and inspiring story. Now grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for a journey that will make you angry, break your heart, and leave you shocked until the very last moment. Let's begin. Nobody tells you that loneliness has a smell. Amara Cruz learned that on her very first morning inside the Vance penthouse. It wasn't the smell of neglect exactly. The place was obsessively clean, scrubbed and polished by a silent housekeeping staff who moved through the rooms like ghosts and made eye contact with nobody. It wasn't the smell of illness either, though there was a man dying in the East Wing bedroom. It was something quieter than both of those things. Something that had settled into the walls and the white marble floors and the floor-to-ceiling windows like dust that no amount of cleaning could reach. It was the smell of a place where nobody had loved anybody in a very long time. She stood in the hallway outside Arthur Vance's bedroom door on that first morning, folder in hand, and took one slow breath. Then she knocked. "Come in." The voice was low, tired, but there was something underneath it, a sharpness, a precision, that told her this man had once commanded entire rooms without raising it. She pushed the door open. Arthur Vance was propped against 3 pillows in a hospital-grade bed that looked completely out of place surrounded by all that expensive furniture. He was 65 but looked older right now. The accident had taken something visible from him, some outer layer of armor that wealthy men wear without realizing it. His silver beard was neat, his grey eyes were sharp, but his hands resting on top of the white blanket were pale and still, and there was an IV line running into his left arm, and the monitors beside the bed beeped with that flat, indifferent rhythm that Amara had learned to read during her 2 years of caretaking work. She had cared for 7 patients before Arthur Vance. She knew within the first 60 seconds of meeting someone whether the job would be hard on her body or hard on her heart. This one, she already knew, would be hard on her heart. "Mr. Vance," she said, stepping inside and setting her folder on the small table near the door. "My name is Amara Cruz. The agency sent me. I'll be taking care of you." He studied her for a long moment, not rudely, more like a man who had spent decades reading people quickly and was now doing it carefully, slowly, because he had the time. "You're young," he said finally. 24, she said. "But I'm good at this." Something moved in his eyes, not quite a smile, more like the memory of one. "Sit down," he said, nodding toward the chair beside the bed. "The last caretaker they sent me stood in the doorway the whole time she talked to me, like she was afraid I was contagious." Amara pulled the chair close and sat down without hesitation. "Were you?" she asked. This time he did smile. Small, quiet, real. "Probably," he said. "Been a difficult man most of my life." "That's all right," she said simply. "Difficult men still need their medication on time." He laughed at that. It was a short sound, a little rusty from disuse, but it filled the room in a way that surprised them both. That was how it started. Not dramatically, not with music or revelation. Just a young woman pulling a chair close to a lonely old man's bed and speaking to him like he was a person instead of a problem. The penthouse had 3 other permanent residents when Amara arrived. Arthur Vance, 28, Arthur's only son, occupied the master suite on the opposite end of the floor. Amara saw him for the first time on her second day, tall, dark-haired, wearing a suit jacket at 8 in the morning inside his own home, moving through the kitchen with the focused energy of someone who treated every room like a boardroom. He glanced at her once, registered her presence the way you register a new piece of furniture, and looked away. He did not introduce himself. He did not ask about his father. He poured his coffee, took a call in sharp-clipped sentences about quarterly projections, and left. The elevator doors closed behind him, and the penthouse went quiet again, and Amara stood in the kitchen holding Arthur's breakfast tray and felt something settle in her chest. a kind of understanding. The cold smell in this apartment, she knew now where it was coming from. Tiffany and Lexi, Arthur's two daughters, were home less frequently. When they were there, Amara heard them before she saw them. The click of heels, the bright artificial laughter, the sound of shopping bags rustling. They were 26 and 23, respectively, both beautiful in the way of women who had spent enormous amounts of money on being beautiful, and both completely uninterested in the man dying in the East Wing bedroom. Amara watched all of this quietly. She was good at watching. It was one of the things that made her excellent at her job. She noticed everything and reacted to very little outwardly. She noticed that none of Arthur's children knocked on his bedroom door. She noticed that his dinner tray was often returned untouched when left by the household staff, but that he ate well when she sat with him. She noticed that he slept better on the nights she stayed late and read to him from the old books on his shelf. Not children's books, not light fiction, but the dense historical biographies he had loved in his healthier years and could no longer hold up long enough to read himself. She noticed that he was starving, not for food, for company, for someone to look at him and see Arthur the man, not Arthur the asset. So she fed him that instead, every single day. By the third week, they had a rhythm: mornings, medication, vitals, breakfast together. Arthur would talk about his early years, the small apartment in Queens, his father's hardware store, the first business he built with borrowed money and borrowed time. He talked about these things with a warmth he clearly didn't apply to his current life, and Amara listened to every word with the kind of attention that made people feel like what they were saying mattered. Because to her it did. Afternoons, rest, physical therapy exercises, the window. Arthur loved the window. His bed had been repositioned at his quiet request so that he could see a slice of Central Park between the buildings. On clear days he would stare at it for long stretches without speaking, and Amara learned not to fill that silence with noise. She would sit nearby, updating his care log or simply being present, and let him have those minutes with whatever memories he was visiting. Evenings, dinner, reading, the slow dimming of the monitors as he drifted towards sleep. It was on one of those evenings in the 5th week that he told her. She had just finished reading a chapter of a biography about Abraham Lincoln. Arthur had a thing for presidents who had come from nothing, and she closed the book and looked up to find him watching her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before, something that looked almost like grief. "Amara," he said. Yes, he was quiet for a moment. Outside, Manhattan hummed its endless hum 34 floors below. "The doctor came while you were at the pharmacy this afternoon," he said. She set the book down slowly. "I know. I saw his note in the file, then you know what he told me." She met his eyes. "Yes, Mr. Vance, I know." The accident injuries had developed into something the body couldn't fight. The word the doctor had used in his note was terminal. The timeline he had estimated was written in careful clinical language that translated simply to, "Not long." Arthur looked at the window. The city lights were coming on, small and glittering, indifferent to the conversation happening 34 floors above the street. "I'm not afraid of dying," he said quietly. "I've made peace with that. What I haven't made peace with," he stopped, pressed his lips together, started again. "What I haven't made peace with is the idea of what happens after, to everything I built, to the people who." Another pause, "to the people who should matter." Amara didn't say anything. She knew this wasn't the moment for words. She reached out and placed her hand over his pale, still one on the blanket. He looked down at her hand, then back at her face. "You remind me of my wife," he said, "Eleanor. She died when Ethan was 12. Maybe that's why they turned out the way they did. Maybe I wasn't enough after she was gone. I gave them everything money could give them and nothing that mattered." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "I failed them, and they became my failure, walking around in expensive clothes." The room was very quiet. "You didn't fail me," Amara said softly. "I know I've only been here 5 weeks, but you've treated me with more dignity than people I've known for years. That says something about who you are, Mr. Vance." He turned his hand over beneath hers and held it, just briefly, the way a father holds his child's hand. Then he released it and reached toward the drawer of his bedside table. He withdrew a book. It was beautiful in the way that simple things are beautiful. A leather-bound diary, deep brown, soft with age at the corners, tied with a thin cord. He held it for a moment like it was something precious before he extended it toward her. "I've been writing in this," he said, "for some time now. It contains things I should have said to people years ago and never did. Thoughts I've never spoken out loud." He paused. "I want you to have it." Amara looked at the diary in his hands. "Mr. Vance, but I need you to promise me one thing," he said, and his grey eyes were very serious now, very steady. "Don't open it while I'm still alive. I need to know it's safe with you. I need to know that you have it." "I can't," he exhaled slowly. "Just promise me." When I'm gone, it's yours. Until then, keep it close and keep it closed." She took the diary from his hands. It was lighter than she expected. "And heavier. I promise," she said. He nodded once, deeply, like something had been resolved in him that had been unresolved for a long time. Then he leaned back against his pillows and closed his eyes, and within 10 minutes his breathing had slowed into sleep. Amara sat in the chair beside him for another hour without moving. Then she slipped the diary carefully into her canvas tote bag, tucked beneath her spare medical gloves and her care log binder, and in the stress and grief of the weeks that followed, the declining vitals, the harder mornings, the longer nights, she would forget it was there. She wouldn't forget her promise, though. Some promises plant themselves too deep to lose. Outside in the living room that same night, Ethan Vance stood at the floor-to-ceiling window with a glass of whiskey, looking out at the city that he was certain would soon be entirely his. His phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. "How's the old man?" He typed back without looking away from the lights below. Still breathing, not for long, he took a slow sip of whiskey, smiled his cold, small smile, and waited. Nobody warned Amara about the meeting. One morning, 6 weeks after she had first walked into that penthouse, Arthur asked her to help him get dressed. Not in his usual comfortable clothes, the soft grey sweater, the loose trousers she helped him into every morning. He wanted his good shirt, the white one with the fine collar that hung pressed and untouched in the far corner of his wardrobe. She helped him without asking questions. That was one of the things he appreciated most about her. She never pushed. She helped him button the shirt slowly, carefully, because his fingers weren't cooperating the way they used to, and she straightened his collar and stepped back and looked at him. "You look distinguished," she said. "I look like a man trying to look distinguished," he said. "There's a difference." She smiled, "Not from where I'm standing." He held her gaze for a moment, something sitting behind his eyes that she couldn't quite read. Then he said, "Ethan is coming this morning. I need you to stay in the room." She nodded. "Of course. Whatever happens," he said carefully, "I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing." That was the first time something shifted in Amara's chest. Not fear exactly. More like the feeling you get when the sky changes color before a storm. Everything looks the same, but something in the air is different, and your body knows it before your mind does. Ethan arrived at 10. He came into his father's bedroom the way he entered every room, like he already owned it. He was wearing a charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt open in that deliberate way that said, "I'm powerful enough not to try." He smelled expensive. He carried his phone in one hand and didn't put it away when he sat down. His eyes moved to Amara once, a flat, assessing look, and then moved away like she was part of the furniture. "You wanted to see me," he said to his father, not a question, not warm. Just a sentence that meant, "Let's get this over with." Arthur sat straight against his pillows. The effort it cost him was visible, but he didn't let it show in his voice. "I want to talk about the inheritance," Arthur said. Ethan's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, a sharpening, like an animal that has just heard the word it's been waiting for. "I'm listening," he said. "The real estate portfolio, my personal accounts, the controlling shares of Vance Enterprises," Arthur said slowly, letting each item land with its full weight. "You want them. They're rightfully mine," Ethan said. "I've run that company for 3 years while I what?" Arthur's voice was quiet, but it cut cleanly through the room. "While I was inconveniently ill." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." Arthur looked at his son for a long moment. "I will give you everything, Ethan, every share, every property, every dollar. But there is one condition, silence. You will marry Amara." The room didn't just go quiet. It went still. The kind of still that exists in the second between lightning and thunder. Ethan turned his head slowly toward Amara. She was standing near the window, her hands loose at her sides, her face completely calm on the outside, while something inside her had just lurched sideways off a shelf. Then he laughed. A short, sharp sound with nothing funny in it. "You're serious," he said. "I have never been more serious in my life," Arthur said. "She's the help," Ethan said flatly. "No cruelty in it. Just a fact, delivered the way you'd state a temperature. She is literally employed by this household. She is the only person in this household who has treated me like a human being in the last 2 months, Arthur said. "And that is not a small thing, Ethan. That is everything." Ethan stood up. He straightened his jacket with one sharp tug and looked down at his father with an expression that Amara would remember for a long time. Not anger exactly, more like contempt wearing the mask of patience. "Fine," he said, "just that. Fine," like it was a minor schedule adjustment. "Sign the papers first," Ethan added. "Transfer everything into my name and then we'll discuss the wedding." Arthur smiled. It was a sad smile, knowing and tired and completely unsurprised. "First the marriage," Arthur said, "then the wealth, not before." Ethan looked at his father for 3 full seconds. Then he put his phone in his pocket, buttoned the one button of his jacket, and walked out of the room without another word. Amara stood by the window and didn't move until she heard the elevator doors close. Then she turned to Arthur. "Mr. Vance, I know," he said gently. "I know this is not what you expected. I know it isn't fair to ask." He paused and his voice dropped lower. "But I am asking anyway, because I know my son, and I know what he will do the moment I am gone if there is nothing standing between him and that power. I need someone with a conscience holding the door." He looked at her steadily. "Will you trust me?" Amara looked at this man who had held her hand in the dark and cried about his dead wife, and eaten the soup she made from his mother's recipe, and listened to her talk about her own family with genuine interest, and never once made her feel like she was less than. She breathed in slowly. "Yes," she said quietly, "I trust you." He closed his eyes briefly, relief moving through him like a wave. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, my dear." What nobody in that room knew was that Ethan had called Chloe Harrington before the elevator even reached the lobby. Chloe was 26, beautiful in the way of a blade, striking and cold and designed to cut. She was in her apartment on the Upper East Side when the call came, standing at her vanity in a silk robe, applying the first of what would be many layers of her daily armor, and she listened to Ethan's clipped summary of the meeting with the focused attention of a woman who had learned early that information was currency. "Marry the caretaker," she repeated slowly when he finished. "To get the inheritance," Ethan said. "The old man won't budge." Chloe set down her makeup brush, looked at herself in the mirror for a moment with those cold green eyes. "Then marry her," she said simply. "Chloe, listen to me." Her voice was smooth, unhurried. "He is dying. You said it yourself, weeks, maybe a month or two at most. You marry this woman, you get the old man's blessing, and the moment he takes his last breath, we file for divorce, we throw her out with nothing, and everything is ours." A small smile. "She gets a few months of playing wife in a penthouse. We get a billion-dollar empire. I think we're getting the better end of that deal." There was a pause on the line. "You're not bothered," Ethan said. "By the marriage." "Why would I be bothered?" Chloe said, picking up her brush again. "A paper marriage to a broke caretaker means nothing. The only marriage that matters is the one that comes after, when you're the head of an empire and I'm standing next to you." She paused. "Just make sure she understands exactly what she is in that house. Don't let her get comfortable." Ethan's cold smile returned. "That," he said, "I can manage." The wedding happened 12 days later. There was no celebration, no flowers, no music, no gathering of people who loved them. A civil ceremony in a sterile room with a justice of the peace. 2 building staff members pulled in reluctantly as witnesses, and Arthur watching from a wheelchair that it had taken all of his remaining dignity to agree to use. Amara wore a simple cream dress she had owned for 2 years. She had pressed it carefully that morning with the same attention she gave everything she did, and she had pulled her dark curls back neatly, and she had looked at herself in the bathroom mirror before she left and said quietly to her own reflection, "You're doing the right thing." She wasn't sure she believed it yet, but she said it anyway. Ethan stood beside her during the ceremony with the energy of a man waiting for a flight, present in body, somewhere else entirely in mind. He said the required words in the required places with the flat precision of someone reading from a list. He did not look at her. When the justice of the peace said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan turned to her and pressed his lips to her cheek. Barely a touch, cold and dry, less intimate than a handshake, and then stepped back and it was done. Arthur reached out from his wheelchair and took Amara's hand. His grip was weak now, but his eyes were full. "Thank you," he said again. And this time the words carried the weight of everything he couldn't say in that room. The apology for asking this of her, the gratitude for her saying yes, the grief of a father who knew his son was standing 6 feet away and was already a stranger. Amara squeezed his hand back. She didn't let herself cry. Not there, not in front of Ethan. Chloe moved into the penthouse 4 days after the wedding. She arrived with 7 suitcases and the confidence of a woman who had already decided which rooms were hers. She walked through the penthouse with Ethan at her side, touching surfaces, opening closet doors, making small comments about the decor in the tone of someone planning renovations. She installed herself in the master bedroom suite, Ethan's suite. Without a word of discussion or explanation, she passed Amara in the hallway. On her first morning there, Amara was carrying Arthur's breakfast tray. Chloe was wearing a silk robe that cost more than Amara's monthly salary, holding a coffee mug, looking at Amara with an expression of such complete and effortless dismissal that it landed like a physical thing. "You're the wife," Chloe said. The word wife sat inside quotation marks in her mouth, invisible but audible. "Cute dress." Her eyes moved over Amara's simple clothing slowly, the way you look at something you're deciding whether to throw away. Amara looked back at her steadily. "Good morning," she said. Just that. Simple. Unbothered on the outside. Chloe's eyes narrowed very slightly, like she had expected something different, a flinch, a stumblesome crack to press on, and hadn't gotten it. She turned away and walked toward the kitchen. Amara continued down the hallway toward Arthur's room. She kept her face neutral until she pushed through his door and set the tray down on his table, and then she stood with her back to him for just a moment, one hand resting on the edge of the table, breathing slowly. "Amara," Arthur's voice, quiet and knowing. "I'm fine," she said. "I know you are," he said. "That's what worries them." She turned around. He was watching her with those sharp grey eyes, and despite everything, the illness, the wheelchair, the IV line, the monitors, there was something in his expression that looked just briefly like a man who still had one card left to play. She didn't know what that meant then. She would understand it later, much later. In a ballroom full of people, when a screen lit up and a dead man's voice filled the room, but that was still to come. For now she pulled the chair close to his bed, sat down and handed him his tea, and outside in the gleaming, cold penthouse, Chloe laughed at something on her phone, and Ethan signed documents that he believed would change everything, and the leather-bound diary sat quietly at the bottom of Amara's canvas tote bag in the corner of her small room waiting. The penthouse had a sound in the early mornings that Amara had learned to recognize, not a pleasant sound. Not the sound of a home waking up, coffee brewing, voices, the small warm noises of people who were glad to be alive in the same space together. It was the sound of machinery, the hum of the elevator, the automated climate control adjusting itself, the distant city noise bleeding through 34 floors of glass, like a reminder that the world outside kept moving regardless of what was happening inside these walls. She would lie in the narrow bed in the servants' quarters, the room Ethan had assigned her with a single sentence and no discussion, a room that had a window facing a concrete shaft and a radiator that clicked all night, and she would listen to that sound and remind herself why she was here. Arthur, that was the answer every time. Just that one word, that one man, that one promise she had made to herself the night he held her hand and told her about Eleanor and cried without apologizing for it. She was here for him. Everything else. Ethan's silence, Chloe's cruelty, the humiliation of being a wife who slept in the servants' quarters while another woman occupied the master suite. All of it she filed away in a place inside herself that she didn't visit during the day. She was good at that. She had grown up learning that survival sometimes required a very specific kind of discipline, the discipline of feeling everything and showing only what was necessary. She showed Arthur her warmth. She showed Ethan and Chloe her calm. What she kept for herself in the dark of that small room was the exhaustion, the grief that was already beginning because she could read vitals, and she knew how to interpret what the numbers were telling her, and the numbers had been telling her the same thing for 3 weeks now. Arthur was running out of time. He knew it too, he had always known it. But somewhere in the 7th week something shifted in him, not toward fear but toward urgency. Like a man who had been planning something for a long time and could now see the deadline approaching and needed to make sure every piece was in place. He started asking for Robert Sterling. Robert came on a Tuesday, the first time Amara saw him. He arrived carrying a slim leather briefcase, wearing a dark suit, with the kind of quiet precision that suggested he had been wearing suits like that for 30 years and felt completely at home in them. He was 50, serious-faced, with wire-rimmed glasses and salt and pepper hair parted with mathematical neatness. He shook Amara's hand at the bedroom door with a firm, brief grip and looked at her with deep-set eyes that held an expression she couldn't quite categorize. Not cold, not warm exactly. More like assessing. The way a person looks at something they've heard about and are now seeing for the first time and finding that it matches exactly what they expected. "Mrs. Cruz," he said. Just her name, like he already knew everything about her. "Mr. Sterling," she said. He nodded once, and then she stepped out and closed the door behind her, and the two men were alone for 2 hours. She didn't ask Arthur what they discussed. That wasn't her place, and she understood that instinctively. But when Robert Sterling left that afternoon, he passed her in the hallway and paused. "He speaks very highly of you," Robert said. His voice was low, measured. "He's a good man," Amara said simply. Robert looked at her for a moment over the rims of his glasses. "Yes," he said, "he is, one of the few." And then he continued down the hallway and was gone. Robert Sterling came back 4 more times over the following 2 weeks, always with his briefcase, always for exactly 2 hours, always leaving with the same unreadable expression and the same deliberate quietness. Ethan noticed. Of course Ethan noticed. He missed nothing that related to money, and a family attorney making repeated private visits to a dying billionaire's bedroom was not something a man like Ethan Vance could observe, without his internal calculations running at full speed. He cornered Amara in the kitchen one morning, not aggressively. Ethan was too controlled for anything as messy as aggression, but deliberately. He poured himself coffee and stood between her and the door in a way that was almost casual and completely intentional. "What does my father talk to Sterling about?" he asked. Amara opened the refrigerator and took out the orange juice she needed for Arthur's breakfast. "I'm not in those meetings," she said. "You're in that room all day. He must say something." "He talks about Lincoln mostly," she said, "and your mother, and a hardware store in Queens." Ethan stared at her, looking for the lie in it. There wasn't one. She was telling the truth. Those were the things Arthur talked about with her. What Robert Sterling came to discuss was a different matter entirely, and one she genuinely had no information about. He stepped aside, let her pass, but she felt his eyes on her back all the way down the hallway. It was during Robert's fourth visit that Amara heard something she wasn't meant to hear. She had come back to the East Wing earlier than expected. Arthur had asked for his afternoon medication at a different time, and she had the pills in her hand. And she was 3 steps from the bedroom door when she heard Arthur's voice clearly through the wood. "The trust is locked," Arthur was saying. Completely, Robert's voice. Calm, professional. "It cannot be accessed, contested, or dissolved without her signature. I've structured it to withstand any legal challenge Ethan might mount. Believe me, Arthur, I've thought of everything he might try. And the video, recorded, stored, and loaded on the drive. I have it. It goes nowhere near this apartment." A pause. Arthur's breathing, slightly labored. "She doesn't know," Arthur said. It wasn't a question. "She has no idea." Robert confirmed. "Good." Another pause. "She would argue. She would tell me it was too much, that she didn't earn it, that I should find another way." A sound that might have been a tired laugh. "She has never once thought about what she deserves. That's exactly why she deserves it." Amara stood in the hallway with the medication in her hand and didn't move for a long moment. She didn't understand everything she had just heard. She didn't know about any trust. She didn't know about any video. She filed the words away carefully in that place inside herself, and then she knocked on the door and waited to be invited in. And when she entered, both men looked at her with expressions that revealed nothing. "Your 3 o'clock medication, Mr. Vance," she said. "Thank you." "My dear," Arthur said. Robert Sterling picked up his briefcase, and Amara poured a glass of water and helped Arthur with his pills and didn't ask a single question. Arthur declined faster in the 9th week. It happened the way these things always happen. Not in a single dramatic moment, but in small, quiet surrenders. The mornings when he couldn't finish his breakfast, the afternoons when the window no longer seemed to interest him and he stared at the ceiling instead. The evenings when he fell asleep before she could finish the chapter, the book open in her lap and his breathing already slow and deep. She adjusted everything around him without being asked. Softer foods, shorter reading sessions, more silence, more presence, less talking. She learned the specific way he needed his pillows arranged so his breathing was easier, and she learned the time of night when the pain was worst, and had his medication ready before he had to ask. She was with him on the morning he reached for her hand and didn't let go for a long time. "I want to tell you something," he said. "I'm listening." He was quiet for a moment, gathering something. Outside it was raining, a grey, steady Manhattan rain that turned the window into a wash of blurred light. "I have not been a perfect man," he said. "I have been selfish and I have been absent and I have made choices that I cannot unmake." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "But I want you to know that these months with you, watching how you live, how you treat people, how you carry yourself even when people treat you like you are less than nothing." He stopped. His voice had thickened. "You have shown me something I forgot existed. Genuine goodness. Not performed, not strategic, just real." Amara's throat tightened. She kept her face steady. "You've shown me the same thing," she said softly. "What I've done," he said, "what I've arranged, you'll understand it when the time comes. I need you to trust that I did it with care, that I thought about you, that every decision I made in these last weeks was made with your protection in mind." She squeezed his hand. "I trust you. I told you that from the beginning." He nodded slowly, deeply. Rain ran down the glass. "There's one more thing," he said. "What is it?" When everything happens, he paused, choosing words carefully. "Don't let them make you small. Whatever they do, whatever they say, however they try to humiliate you." His grey eyes found hers and held them with a steadiness that had nothing to do with his failing body. "Stand up straight. Keep your head up, because I promise you, Amara, the last word in this story belongs to you." She didn't know what he meant then. She would. Arthur Vance passed away on a quiet Thursday morning in the 10th week. Amara was there. She was always there. She had fallen asleep in the chair beside his bed the previous night, her care log open on her lap, and she woke in the grey pre-dawn to the sound of the monitors changing, a shift in rhythm that her body recognized before her mind did. And she reached for his hand in the dark and held it while the city outside began its indifferent mourning. He didn't wake up again, but she liked to believe, in some place beyond proof, that he knew she was there. When the medical staff arrived, and then the household staff, and eventually, much later, Ethan, who came out of his bedroom in a suit, already on his phone, face arranged into an expression of appropriate grief that didn't reach his eyes. Amara was sitting in the hallway outside the bedroom door with her hands folded in her lap. Ethan walked past her without a word. 20 minutes later, she heard him on the phone in the living room, voice low and energized in a way that had nothing to do with grief. "Call the plaza," he was saying. "I want the grand ballroom for the 14th. Yes, the whole floor. We're celebrating." Amara looked down at her hands, then she stood up, went back to her room, and began to pack her few belongings into her canvas tote bag. The diary was still there, at the bottom. She had carried it every day for weeks and forgotten it was there, and now her hand touched the soft leather cover, and she paused. "Don't open it while I'm still alive." She thought of his voice saying those words, the weight of them. She thought of what he'd said in those final weeks. "The last word in this story belongs to you." She closed the bag without opening the diary. Not yet. 3 days after Arthur's funeral, a cold, efficient service that lasted 40 minutes and was attended largely by business associates. Ethan called Amara into the living room. Chloe was there, sitting on the white sofa with her legs crossed, holding a champagne glass at 11 in the morning with the comfort of a woman who had already decided she lived here. Ethan stood at the window. His window now, his expression said. "We're having a gala," he announced. 2 weeks from Saturday. The Plaza Hotel, Grand Ballroom. New York's entire business community, press, everyone. He paused. "You'll attend?" Amara looked at him steadily. "All right, wear something simple," Chloe said from the sofa, not looking up from her phone. A small smile at the corner of her mouth. "Nothing too," a tiny pause. Loaded, ambitious. Amara looked at Chloe, then back at Ethan. She understood what this was. She wasn't naive, and she had never been. She could read a room the way she read vitals, quickly, accurately, without needing it spelled out. This wasn't an invitation. It was a setup. They were bringing her somewhere public to do something that couldn't be undone privately. She thought about standing up straight, about keeping her head up. "I'll be ready," she said simply, and she walked back down the hallway to her room. And she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, and for the first time since Arthur died, she allowed herself 5 full minutes of feeling everything, the grief, the exhaustion, the humiliation, the fear. 5 minutes, then she straightened her spine, picked up her tote bag, and went to make dinner. The diary shifted at the bottom of the bag as she moved, podent waiting, and across town, in his office on the 42nd floor of a different building, Robert Sterling opened his desk drawer, looked at the USB drive sitting inside it, and closed the drawer again. His expression, as always, revealed nothing, but if you had been in that room and watching carefully, you might have noticed the very slight, very deliberate quality of the way he folded his hands on his desk afterward. The quality of a man who has been waiting a long time for the right moment, and who knows with complete certainty that it is almost here. The dress was plain. Amara had known it would be plain because Chloe had made that clear with one word, and a smile that meant something uglier than a smile should mean. So she pulled out the burgundy wrap dress she had owned for 2 years, steamed it carefully, and stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself. $47. Her cousin's wedding. She had felt beautiful that day, surrounded by people who loved her. She put it on anyway. She did her own hair, wore her mother's gold earrings, picked up her canvas tote bag out of pure habit. She had carried it every day for so long that leaving a room without it felt wrong, and walked out into the hallway where Ethan and Chloe were waiting. Chloe's eyes moved over Amara's dress once. Slowly. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The 3 of them rode the elevator down in complete silence. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom hit her like a wave. 500 people, chandelier light turning everything golden, the layered noise of money and ambition filling every corner. Women in gowns, men in tuxedos. Cameras from 3 media outlets already positioned near the stage. Amara walked in behind Ethan and Chloe and felt the room's invisible calculation land on her immediately. The quick, practiced assessment that wealthy rooms perform on everyone who enters. Eyes found her burgundy dress and moved on. Eyes found Chloe's silver gown and stayed. Eyes found Ethan and locked there, because Ethan Vance was the reason every person in that ballroom had shown up tonight. She found a quiet table at the edge of the room, set her bag at her feet, and watched. She was good at watching, she always had been. 2 hours in, the energy shifted, the string quartet faded, the crowd turned toward the stage. Ethan was walking up the steps with Chloe 3 steps behind him, her expression bright and hungry in a way she wasn't bothering to hide anymore. He took the microphone. "Thank you all for being here," he began, smooth and practiced, filling the room effortlessly. "Tonight is about celebration, a new chapter for Vance Enterprises." Applause. He let it settle. "But first, something personal." The room stilled. "Some of you know my father passed recently." The right pause, the right gravity. What you may not know is that his vulnerability in those final months was exploited. His eyes crossed the room and found Amara standing at the edge of it. She looked back at him. She did not look away. This woman manipulated a sick, lonely old man into arranging a marriage that served no one but herself. His voice carried just enough edge to make the word woman feel like something smaller. She is plainly an opportunistic gold digger who made her calculations and acted on them. 500 people turned to look at her simultaneously. She felt every eye, felt the weight of every judgment. The heat behind her own eyes told her tears were forming, and she breathed slowly, deliberately, and kept her spine straight and her chin level. "Don't let them make you small." Chloe stepped onto the stage and took Ethan's arm. He covered her hand with his and smiled his cold smile. "And so tonight, before this city, I am ending this farce of a marriage." He looked directly at Amara. "You are free to go back to wherever you came from." 3 seconds of absolute silence, then the doors opened. The heavy gilded doors at the far end of the ballroom swung wide with quiet authority, and Robert Sterling walked in dark suit, wire-rimmed glasses, salt and pepper hair precisely parted, leather briefcase in his left hand, and in his right hand, a leather-bound diary's breath caught deep brown, soft at the corners. Tied with a thin cord, Robert walked the full length of that ballroom without breaking stride, without looking at anyone but the stage. The crowd parted. He reached the stage steps, opened his briefcase, withdrew a USB drive, climbed the steps, and plugged it into the main presentation system with the unhurried precision of a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment. He turned to the room. "My name is Robert Sterling. I am the executor of Arthur Vance's estate." His voice carried without the microphone. "Arthur left a message. I was instructed to deliver it at the appropriate time." A pause. "This is the appropriate time." He pressed play. The 4 massive ballroom screens lit up simultaneously. Arthur Vance was sitting in his armchair by the window, pale, diminished, completely, absolutely himself. Silver beard, neat, white shirt with the fine collar. Grey eyes looking directly into the camera. Amara made a sound she didn't intend, a small broken inhale. She pressed her hand to her mouth. "If this video is playing," Arthur said, his voice filling every speaker in that ballroom, "then my son has done exactly what I predicted." Total silence. 500 people. "Ethan, you married Amara for my money, not for her. Not because I asked you to treat her with basic human decency, none of which you managed, but because you wanted what I built." A breath. Steady. "My daughters abandoned me. My son visited me to inventory what he would inherit. In the darkest months of my life, one person sat beside me. One person asked how I was feeling. One person held my hand in the dark and made me feel like a human being who still mattered." The ballroom was so quiet you could hear the chandeliers. "Amara Cruz came to my home as an employee. She became, in every way that counts, the family I failed to raise." Arthur looked down briefly, then back up, "So I acted accordingly." Ethan's hand went very still on the microphone stand. "Before the wedding, weeks before, through Robert Sterling, with full legal documentation, I transferred my entire personal wealth, all real estate holdings, and a 51% controlling stake of Vance Enterprises into a locked trust." Each word landed in that silence like a stone dropped into still water. "The sole beneficiary and controller of that trust is Amara Cruz. Vance, Ethan, you own nothing. And according to the legal covenants already filed and made incontestable, any attempt to divorce or demean Amara results in your immediate and permanent removal from Vance Enterprises." A pause. "You will be broke." A current of shock moved through 500 people. Arthur's voice softened. "Amara, my dear, I know you're in that room." He looked into the camera and his grey eyes were full. "You never asked for anything. You gave and asked for nothing except the chance to do your job with dignity. This inheritance is not a reward. It is a recognition. It is me saying clearly, legally, publicly, that the way you treated a dying old man mattered. That loyalty matters. That decency matters more than any balance sheet I ever signed." A pause so gentle it hurt. "I am so proud of you." The screen held his face for 3 seconds, then went dark. The ballroom erupted. Ethan hadn't moved. He stood at the microphone with his hand still on the stand and his face completely empty. Not controlled, not managed, just hollow. The architecture of his certainty had collapsed and left nothing standing. Chloe let go of his arm, no drama, no decision. Her fingers simply opened and fell away, and she took one step sideways, 18 inches that might as well have been a continent. She looked at him once with those cold green eyes, the look of a woman rapidly recalculating, finding nothing worth staying for. Then she turned and walked off the stage without a word. Ethan watched her go. Something crossed his face then. Not grief, not humiliation, but both arriving at once with nowhere to go. For one unguarded moment he looked exactly like what he was. A man who had spent his whole life acquiring things and had just discovered he had nothing. Robert stepped to the microphone. "Mr. Vance, please step down. Security is here." Two men in dark jackets appeared at the stage steps. Ethan looked at them, looked at the room. 500 faces looking back. He stepped down. Amara was still standing at the edge of the ballroom. Robert crossed the room to her and held out the diary with both hands. "Carefully, the way you hold something that matters." "He asked me to return this to you tonight," Robert said quietly. "He said you'd know when to read it." She took it. The leather was warm. "Did you know from the beginning?" she asked. "From the 3rd week you were there," Robert said. "He called me the morning after you sat with him through his first bad night. He said he had finally met someone who reminded him that people were worth protecting." Something moved briefly behind Robert's eyes. He was very specific about that. Amara's throat tightened. He was worth protecting too. Robert nodded once, a nod that contained more than nods usually do, and walked away. She found a quiet corner and opened the diary. The handwriting was careful and slightly unsteady. A man writing through pain, through fatigue, through the effort of putting wordless things into words. The first entry was dated the day after she arrived. "A young woman came today." She knocked before she entered. "Such a small thing. I cannot remember the last time anyone knocked." She turned pages slowly. His memories, his regrets, his observations of her. Precise and kind and so accurate they made her breath catch. She doesn't know how strong she is. People who are genuinely strong rarely do. She turned to the last entry. "Amara, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the world has shown you exactly what kind of place it can be. I hope it has also shown you exactly what kind of person you are. You changed my life. Not my circumstances, those were always going to end this way, but my life, the interior of it, the part that counts. You reminded me that human beings are capable of extraordinary decency, and that is not a small gift to give a dying man. Build something good. I know you will. I am proud of you, my dear." Arthur, she closed the diary, held it against her chest, stood up. The journalists reached her within seconds. Cameras, recorders, questions arriving from every direction. She stood in her burgundy dress with her mother's gold earrings, catching the chandelier light, and let them come. "Mrs. Cruz Vance, what will you do with the company?" She had thought about this. In the small hours in her narrow bed, during long quiet nights beside Arthur's window. "The first thing I'm going to do," she said clearly, "is establish a foundation for elderly people who are ill and alone with no one to sit with them." She held the diary a little closer. "Because the most devastating poverty has nothing to do with money." Outside on the wet sidewalk, Ethan stood in the rain. His card had been declined at the coat check. A small, absurd humiliation that somehow hit harder than the ballroom because it was so ordinary. Such plain material proof of everything that had just happened. He stood in his expensive tuxedo in the rain and thought about his father's voice coming through those speakers, the steadiness of it. No cruelty, no satisfaction, just a tired, honest man saying true things. He thought about Amara standing at the edge of that room with her spine perfectly straight in a $47 dress. He thought about Chloe walking away without looking back. The rain came down. He had spent his whole life looking at people like they were below him, like their feelings were variables too small to calculate. He stood on that sidewalk and understood, with a completeness that would take years to fully absorb, that he had been wrong about almost everything that mattered. He didn't move. Just stood there in the rain with nothing real, nothing lasting, nothing a single person on earth would mourn the loss of, feeling the full, irreversible weight of a life spent on the wrong things. Inside, Amara stood at the tall windows looking out over Fifth Avenue. The diary pressed against her chest, her mother's earrings catching the light. She wasn't thinking about the empire or the shares or the foundation. She was thinking about a rainy afternoon and an old man at a window and his voice saying, "You have shown me genuine humanity." She pressed the diary closer and smiled. The money bought him everything and left him with nothing. The kindness cost her nothing and gave her everything. The end.